The vast temple chamber hummed with alien voices, their words carrying the weight of 10,000 years of tradition. Dr. Maya Okafor pressed herself against the cold metal wall, trying to make sense of the flowing symbols that danced across every surface. Each glyph seemed to pulse with its own inner light, creating patterns that made her mathematician's mind itch with recognition. "Stay quiet and do not touch anything," whispered the Etherean guide, his translucent blue skin shimmering with disgust. "Your kind has no understanding of sacred things." Maya bit back her response. 3 weeks of this treatment had taught her when to hold her tongue. The Galactic Dominion had made their position clear from the moment humanity's first ship entered their space. Humans were primitives, savages, unworthy of the divine technologies left behind by the mysterious architects who had vanished eons ago. Captain Alex Reed stood stiffly beside her, his dress uniform doing little to hide his frustration. The welcoming ceremony had turned into a humiliation parade. With each alien species they encountered treating humans like diseased animals. The worst part was how organized it all seemed. This wasn't random prejudice. This was a carefully structured system designed to keep humanity at the bottom. The temple doors opened with a sound like singing crystal, and High Curator Veltharin glided into the chamber. His species, the Etherians, claimed to be the closest to the divine architects. Their pale, elongated forms and glowing eyes certainly looked otherworldly enough. Behind him followed representatives of dozens of alien races, all arranged in careful order based on their supposed spiritual worth. "We gather in the presence of the eternal code," Veltharin intoned, his voice carrying harmonics that made the temple walls resonate. "The architects, in their infinite wisdom, left us guidance for all civilizations. They teach us that not all minds are equal. Not all souls can comprehend divine truth." Maya watched the ceremony unfold, her trained eye catching details others missed. The way certain aliens stood closer to the sacred displays. How some species were allowed to touch specific relics while others could only observe. The entire galaxy operated like a religious caste system, with the Etherians as high priests interpreting the will of absent gods. "The newest arrivals," Veltharon continued, his gaze falling on the human delegation, "have been tested by our most sacred instruments. The architect scanner has measured their spiritual resonance." He paused dramatically. "Category 7, the lowest classification ever recorded." Murmurs rippled through the assembled aliens. Some sounded shocked, others seemed satisfied, as if this confirmed their existing beliefs. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but not from embarrassment. From anger. "What exactly does Category 7 mean?" Reed asked, his voice carefully neutral. Veltharin's large eyes blinked slowly. "It means your species is spiritually deaf. The divine frequencies that guide all higher civilizations are inaudible to your primitive minds. You cannot perceive the sacred mathematics that bind reality together. You are incapable of true understanding." "With respect," Maya said, stepping forward despite her guide's warning gesture, "I'd like to see these sacred mathematics. As a mathematician myself, I might be able to—" "Silence!" Veltharon's voice cracked like thunder. "Your crude mental patterns would contaminate the pure equations. The architect's wisdom is not meant for minds clouded by material thinking." But Maya had already seen what she needed. In the split second before Veltharin blocked her view, she had glimpsed the flowing symbols on the central display. Her photographic memory captured enough to make her heart race. Those weren't religious texts. Those were equations, complex mathematical proofs that seemed to describe quantum mechanical principles she recognized from Earth's most advanced physics. The ceremony continued with various alien species demonstrating their spiritual worth by activating minor architect technologies. Each success was greeted with reverent applause. When it came time for the humans to approach the sacred relics, nothing happened. The ancient devices remained dark and silent, seemingly confirming humanity's unworthiness. "The judgment is clear," Veltharan announced. "The humans will be relocated to Settlement World Designation 47 on the Galactic Rim. They will remain there until such time as they achieve spiritual evolution, if such growth is possible for their kind." Reed stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. "Surely there's room for negotiation. We have technologies, resources, knowledge we could share." "You have nothing we need," interrupted a tall, insect-like alien from the hierarchist faction. "Your metal ships are crude. Your computers are primitive. Your understanding of reality itself is flawed. What could savages possibly offer the civilized galaxy?" The dismissal stung because it wasn't entirely untrue. Humanity's technology did seem primitive compared to the casual miracles they witnessed daily in Dominion space. Ships that bent space-time, energy systems that drew power from parallel dimensions, communication networks that operated faster than light across galactic distances. All of it supposedly worked through divine grace rather than scientific principles. As the ceremony concluded, Maya found herself studying the architectural details of the temple itself. The proportions followed mathematical ratios she recognized. The acoustic properties were engineered with precision that suggested advanced physics rather than religious inspiration. Even the way the lighting systems work seemed to follow natural laws rather than supernatural intervention. "Doctor," Reed said quietly as they were escorted toward the exit, "I need you to remember everything you saw in there." "Already done," Maya replied, tapping her temple. "And Captain? I don't think those architects were gods at all." The Etherean guide overheard and turned with alarm. "Blasphemy! The architects transcended physical existence eons ago. They became pure spirit, pure mathematics, pure divine essence." "Maybe," Maya said, meeting his glowing gaze steadily, "or maybe they were just really good scientists." 3 days later, the human delegation found themselves aboard a transport vessel bound for the Rim territories. Their advanced equipment had been confiscated as potentially contaminating to proper spiritual development. They were given basic tools, enough supplies for 6 months, and a warning that any attempt to develop advanced technology would result in immediate intervention. Reed stood at the small porthole, watching the civilized core worlds shrink behind them. 47 worlds, he muttered. 47 different species they've pushed to the edges for being spiritually inadequate. Maya was already sketching the symbols she had memorized, her mathematical training allowing her to reconstruct the complex equations from memory. "Captain," she said without looking up from her work, "I think they've made a mistake." "How so?" She held up her sketches. "These aren't religious formulas. They're scientific equations describing quantum field interactions. And if I'm right about what I'm seeing here, the architects weren't gods who transcended physical existence." She looked up at him with fire in her eyes. "They were refugees, highly advanced refugees who left their technology behind for whoever was smart enough to figure out how it really works." Reed studied her drawings, seeing nothing but incomprehensible symbols, but he trusted Maya's expertise. "And the Etherians have been running a galactic con game for 10,000 years, claiming divine authority over technology they don't actually understand." Maya's smile was sharp as a blade. "They're not high priests. They're just very good at following instruction. Manuals, they think, are holy scripture." The transport ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying humanity toward their exile among the other unworthy species. But for the first time since arriving in Dominion space, Maya felt hope, rather, than despair. The galaxy's ruling class had just made the mistake of giving Earth's best scientific minds time, privacy, and a very strong motivation to prove them wrong. In the cargo hold below, Their confiscated computers hummed quietly in storage containers, waiting for clever hands to reactivate them. The Etherians had learned to use architect technology through ritual and reverence. Humanity was about to discover what happened when you approach those same tools with curiosity and determination. Instead, the mud squelched under Tom Bradley's boots as he trudged toward the communication array they had been building from salvaged parts. 3 months on Settlement World 47 had turned the initial shock of exile into grinding daily reality. Without their advanced equipment, the human colony struggled with basics like water purification and shelter construction. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead and glanced toward the makeshift laboratory where Maya spent 18 hours a day hunched over her sketches and calculations. The woman barely slept anymore, driven by an obsession with the architect symbols she had memorized during that humiliating ceremony. The other colonists whispered that the stress had gotten to her, but Tom had seen her work. Whatever Maya was, discovering it was keeping her awake for good reason. Commander Beth Torres emerged from the communications hut, her expression grim. She had spent weeks trying to tap into Dominion data networks using improvised equipment, mostly without success. But today something was different about the way she carried herself. "Gather, everyone," Beth called to the nearest colonists. "We need to talk." Within an hour, most of the settlement's 200 inhabitants had assembled in the main shelter. Reed looked tired but alert as Beth activated their jury-rigged holographic display. Static-filled images began to form in the air above them. "I finally managed to crack their communication protocols," Beth announced. "What I found explains a lot about why we're here." The display showed a map of the galaxy, with different colored zones marking various territories. The Dominion controls about 60% of inhabited space. But look at this. The map zoomed in on the rim territories where dozens of worlds were marked with the same symbol humanity had been assigned. Every one of these is a settlement world for species classified as spiritually inadequate. The Drakmari were sent here 50 years ago after they questioned Etherian interpretations of architect doctrine. The Volanti lost their homeworld 30 years ago for developing technology without proper religious oversight. Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. Reed leaned forward. "How many species total?" 47 different civilizations exiled to the rim over the past 3 centuries, Beth replied. "All for the same crime we committed, thinking for ourselves instead of accepting Etherian religious authority." "There's more," Beth continued, bringing up new images. "The Drakmari are dying out. Some kind of genetic plague has been killing them for years. They've begged the Etherians for help, but the high priests claim it's divine judgment for their spiritual failings." Tom felt his hands clench into fists. "They're letting an entire species go extinct over religious politics?" "It gets worse. The Volanti had their population centers bombed when they refused to abandon their ancestral burial grounds. The Etherians needed those sites for a new temple complex." Beth's voice grew harder. "This isn't just discrimination. It's systematic genocide disguised as religious purification." Maya looked up from her calculations for the first time in hours. "Show them what I found," she said quietly. Beth nodded and switched to a new display, showing Maya's reconstructed architect symbols alongside mathematical equations from Earth's physics textbooks. "Maya's been working on those temple inscriptions. Tell them what you discovered." Maya stood, her notebook clutched in her hands like a lifeline. "The architect symbols aren't religious texts. They're mathematical proofs describing quantum field theory, dimensional mechanics, and energy manipulation techniques centuries ahead of our current understanding." She pointed to specific equations. "But here's the crucial part. The fundamental constants, the basic principles, even the mathematical frameworks all match what we know about our own universe's physical laws." "Meaning what, exactly?" asked Dr. James Wright, the colony's chief medical officer. "Meaning the architects weren't gods who transcended physical reality," Maya replied. "They were a highly advanced species working with the same scientific principles we use. They just understood them better than we do. The implications hit the crowd like a wave. Tom watched faces around the room shift from confusion to understanding to anger. So the Etherians have been running a scam for 10,000 years, he said. Bigger than that, Maya continued. I think the Etherians don't actually understand how architect technology works. They've learned to activate it through ritual and ceremony, but they're just following procedures they've turned into religious practices. They think they're communing with divine spirits, but they're really just running advanced computer programs. Reed stood slowly. Can you prove this? Maya's eyes lit up with fierce determination. Give me access to an actual architect device and I can demonstrate it. The technology should respond to scientific input just as well as religious ritual. Maybe better. That's impossible, protested Linda Hayes, the colony's logistics coordinator. Our equipment was confiscated. We're stuck here with nothing but basic tools. Tom cleared his throat. Actually, that's not entirely true. All eyes turned to him as he produced a small device from his jacket. I managed to reactivate one of our portable computers before they finished searching the transport. It's been hidden in the irrigation system. Beth grinned. Tom, you magnificent bastard. What else did you save? 3 computers, 2 quantum scanners, and a fabrication unit, all running on minimal power and hidden in various infrastructure systems. Tom's smile was predatory. I figured we might need them eventually. Reed began pacing, his strategic mind engaging. Maya, how long would you need to test your theories if we could get you access to architect technology? Hours, maybe less. The mathematical principles should be universal. If I'm right, I can demonstrate that their divine frequencies are just quantum resonance patterns that any sufficiently advanced computer can generate. And if you're wrong? Maya met his gaze steadily. Then we're exactly where we are now, exiled primitives with no hope of changing our situation. Beth pulled up star charts on the holographic display. There's an architect relic site about 2 days from here. Minor temple, minimal security. The Etherians use it for routine ceremonies. You're talking about breaking into a sacred site, Wright said nervously. If we're caught, they won't just relocate us. They'll execute us for blasphemy. They're already executing entire species through neglect and persecution, Reed replied, coldly. The question is whether we're going to sit here quietly while they do it, or whether we're going to fight back. Tom was already running calculations in his head. Our ship is still functional, just locked down. I can bypass their control systems, but we'd only have a few hours before they detected the unauthorized launch. Maya clutched her notebook tighter. A few hours is all I need. If the architect technology responds to scientific principles instead of religious ritual, it will prove everything. The Etherians' divine authority is built on a lie. And then what? Asked Hayes. Even if you prove the architects were scientists, how does that help us? The Dominion has millions of ships and billions of soldiers. Reed's expression hardened, with resolve. Information warfare, Linda. If we can prove the Etherians are frauds, we can broadcast that proof to every exiled species in the Rim territories. 47 civilizations with nothing to lose and every reason to fight. Beth nodded slowly. A revolution based on truth instead of faith. I like it. Maya was already gathering her research materials. There's something else. The mathematical principles I've decoded suggest the architect technology is far more powerful than the Etherians realize. They've been using it at maybe 10% capacity because they don't understand the underlying science. You're saying we could potentially operate their technology better than they can? Tom asked. I'm saying we're about to find out. Maya's smile was bright and dangerous. The Etherians have spent 10,000 years worshipping the architects as gods. But gods don't leave instruction manuals. Scientists do. Reed looked around at his people, seeing determination replace despair on their faces. All right, people, We're about to commit the greatest act of heresy in galactic history. Tom, get that ship ready. Beth, prepare a full data package for transmission to every rim world. Maya, bring your notebooks and pray to whatever gods you don't believe in that you're right about this. As the colonists dispersed to prepare for their desperate gamble, Maya remained behind, staring at her reconstructed equations. Tomorrow they would either prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars, or they would die as blasphemers and criminals. But for the first time since their exile began, she felt like they had a real chance to change everything. The Nexus Cathedral hung in space like a crystalline spider, its countless spires reaching toward the galaxy's core in patterns that made Tom's eyes water when he looked too long. Somewhere inside that impossible structure lay the most sacred, architect relic in known space, tended by the highest-ranking Etherean priests and guarded by automated systems that supposedly responded only to the pure of spirit. Maya pressed her face against the ship's porthole, studying the cathedral's architecture with hungry eyes. "Look at those geometric proportions," she whispered to Reed. "Every angle, every measurement follows mathematical ratios I recognize from my calculations. This isn't a temple. It's a massive computational matrix." Reed checked his chronometer. "The Grand Convergence ceremony starts in 4 hours. Half the galaxy's religious leaders will be focused on the main chamber. That's our window." Their stolen Dominion transport ship drifted closer to the cathedral, its identification codes marking it as a routine supply vessel. Tom had spent 2 sleepless days reprogramming their systems to match Dominion specifications, right down to the engine harmonics that supposedly carried proper spiritual resonance. The Etherians were so convinced of their own righteousness that they rarely double-checked vessels bearing correct authorization codes. Beth monitored communication channels from the pilot's seat. "Docking Bay 7 is clear. Most of the staff are preparing for the ceremony. We'll have minimal security to deal with." The plan was insane, desperate, and likely to get them all killed. But after weeks of preparation, it was also their best shot at proving the truth about architect technology. Maya had refined her theories to the point where she could predict exactly how the cathedral's central core should respond to scientific input instead of religious ritual. "Remember," Reed said as they approached the docking bay, "we go in fast. Make the demonstration, record everything, and get out before they realize what happened. Maya gets 10 minutes maximum with the core system." Maya nodded, clutching her portable computer and the quantum resonance generator Tom had jury-rigged from their salvaged equipment. 10 minutes is enough. If I'm right, the response should be immediate and unmistakable." The docking sequence proceeded smoothly, their forged credentials passing automated inspection without challenge. The cathedral's interior corridors stretched, away in flowing curves that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Etherian architecture favored organic shapes that suggested growth rather than construction, as if the buildings had been sung into existence rather than built. They moved through service passages toward the cathedral's heart, following maps Beth had stolen from Dominion databases. The few Etherian workers they encountered ignored them completely, too focused on ceremony preparations to question properly dressed maintenance personnel. "This way," Beth whispered, leading them through a series of increasingly ornate passages. The walls here were covered with architect symbols that seemed to shift and flow when viewed from different angles. Maya's eyes tracked the moving patterns, her mathematical mind automatically analyzing the underlying structures. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "These aren't just decorations. They're active computational displays showing real-time quantum field calculations." "Save the sightseeing for later," Reed muttered, but he was clearly impressed despite his tension. The cathedral was unlike anything in human experience, a fusion of advanced technology and artistic vision that created something approaching the genuinely divine. They reached the central chamber just as the ceremony was beginning in the main temple complex. Through the crystalline walls, they could see thousands of alien worshippers arranged in precise geometric patterns, their voices joining in harmonies that made the entire structure resonate like a vast musical instrument. Maya gasped as she saw the architect core. It rose from the chamber's center like a living tree of light, its crystalline branches extending in fractal patterns that hurt to look at directly. Energy flowed through the structure in visible streams, creating patterns of incredible complexity and beauty. "My God," Reed whispered. "No," Maya replied, pulling out her equipment. "That's the whole point. Not God. Just really, really advanced science." She began setting up her apparatus with practiced efficiency, her quantum resonance generator humming to life as it calibrated to the core's energy signature. "Tom, I need you to monitor the cathedral's communication systems. The moment this starts working, every Etherean priest in the building is going to know something's wrong." Tom activated his scanner and immediately frowned. "Maya, you need to see this. The core isn't just running computational processes. It's actively connected to similar structures across the galaxy. This whole network is functioning as a single distributed computer system." Maya's hands stilled on her equipment. "How distributed?" "Thousands of sites, maybe tens of thousands. Every major architect temple in Dominion space is part of this network." Tom's voice grew excited. "Maya, if you're right about how this technology works, you're not just going to activate one relic. You're going to light up the entire galactic grid," Reed swore quietly. "The Etherians will know instantly. Every priest in the galaxy will feel it when their sacred sites start responding to scientific input instead of religious ritual." Maya looked at the core, then at her equipment, then back at her teammates. "We knew this was a one-way mission when we started. The question is whether we want to whisper our discovery to one temple or shout it to the entire galaxy." Beth grinned fiercely. "I vote for shouting." Maya activated her resonance generator and the chamber filled with a new kind of humming. The architect core's patterns shifted subtly, its flowing energies realigning to match the quantum frequencies her device was producing. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. Then the symbols on the walls began to pulse in perfect synchronization with Maya's equipment. "It's working," she breathed, quickly adjusting her input parameters. "The core is responding to pure mathematical input. No ritual, no ceremony, just direct scientific interface." The core's crystalline branches brightened, and suddenly the chamber filled with holographic displays showing star maps, technical diagrams, and streams of data in languages none of them recognized. But the mathematical notation was universal, and Maya's trained eye could read the essential meaning. "Stellar cartography," she said, pointing to different displays. "Technological specifications, historical records." Her voice grew louder as understanding dawned. "This isn't a religious database. It's a scientific archive left by whoever built these systems." Alarms began sounding throughout the cathedral. Tom's scanner showed security forces converging on their location, while communication channels filled with panicked reports from architect sites across the galaxy. Every temple in the network was activating simultaneously, responding to Maya's demonstration with displays of pure scientific data. "Company's coming," Beth announced, checking her sidearm. The chamber's main entrance burst open, and High Curator Vel Tharan strode in, flanked by temple guards. His normally serene expression was twisted with rage and something that might have been fear. "Blasphemers!" he snarled, his harmonious voice cracking with emotion. "You dare contaminate the sacred core with your crude material instruments?" Maya didn't look up from her readings. "Crude? Your sacred frequencies are just quantum resonance patterns operating at 847.3 terahertz. I'm reading gravitational wave equations that describe faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation techniques that could revolutionize physics, and historical records dating back millions of years." "Lies!" Veltharan advanced into the chamber but stopped as the core's displays shifted to show what appeared to be medical data. The architects speak only to the spiritually enlightened. Your mechanical devices cannot comprehend divine truth. Then, explain this, Maya said, highlighting a specific data stream. These are genetic templates for treating the plague that's killing the Drakmari. Complete molecular specifications for synthesizing a cure. The architect database has the solution. But your priests never found it because they were looking for religious guidance instead of scientific data. Veltharan's glowing eyes widened as more displays materialized around the chamber, each one showing practical technological information that contradicted everything the Dominion taught about architect divinity. "This is impossible," he whispered. The architects transcended physical existence. They became pure spirit, pure divine essence. Maya finally looked up from her equipment, her expression mixing triumph with pity. They became refugees. Highly advanced refugees fleeing some galactic catastrophe, who left their knowledge behind for whoever was smart enough to use it properly. She gestured to the swirling displays. This is their gift to the universe. Not religious mystery, but scientific advancement. And you've been sitting on it for 10,000 years, too afraid to actually understand what you were worshipping. The sound of running feet echoed from the corridors as more security forces arrived. Reed readied his weapon, but Maya held up her hand. "Wait," she said, watching as new figures appeared in the chamber entrance. Not Etherian guards, but representatives of other species who had come for the grand convergence ceremony. Drakmari, Volanti, and dozens of other aliens stared, in wonder at the technological displays surrounding the architect core. A Drakmari elder stepped forward, her scaled features showing desperate hope. "The cure for our people. Is it real?" Maya nodded. "The molecular specifications are complete. Any advanced medical facility could synthesize it within days." Veltharan raised his hands, his voice returning to its ceremonial harmonies. "Do not be deceived by these demons. They speak with forked tongues, poisoning divine revelation with materialist corruption." But his words fell on deaf ears. The assembled aliens were studying the displays with growing amazement, seeing technological solutions to problems their species had faced for generations. The Architect Network continued broadcasting scientific data across the galaxy, undermining 10,000 years of religious orthodoxy with pure, demonstrable truth. Tom's scanner showed more ships arriving at the cathedral, drawn by the unprecedented activation of the Architect Network. "Reed, we've got incoming vessels from a dozen different species. This is about to become a very crowded conversation." Maya saved her readings and began packing her equipment. "Our job here is done. The galaxy has seen the truth. Now it's up to them to decide what to do with it." Veltharan's composure finally cracked completely. "You have murdered the divine. You have torn the mystery from the universe and left only cold equations." "No," Maya replied sadly. "We've given the galaxy back its birthright. The architects didn't want to be worshipped. They wanted their knowledge to be used, to help civilizations grow and advance." She looked directly at the High Curator. They wanted to be understood, not feared. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Reed couldn't help but smile at the chaos surrounding them. Representatives of 47 species were demanding access to the Architect database. Etherian priests were arguing frantically among themselves, and across the galaxy, ancient mysteries were being replaced by comprehensible science. The revolution had begun, and it was being fought with mathematics instead of weapons. Dr. Yuki Tanaka wiped exhaustion from her eyes as she studied the latest batch of test results from her makeshift laboratory on New Geneva. 6 weeks had passed since the Nexus Cathedral incident, and the galaxy was tearing itself apart. The Architect database had yielded more than just theoretical knowledge. It contained practical solutions to problems that had plagued civilizations. For centuries, the cure for the Drakmari plague was working perfectly. Yuki had synthesized the first doses herself, using specifications downloaded directly from the Architect network. And now, Drakmari medical facilities across 3 star systems were producing their own supplies. An entire species was returning, from the brink of extinction, and they had humanity to thank for it. But the cure was only the beginning. The database contained agricultural techniques that could triple crop yields on barren worlds, energy systems that made current technology look like stone tools, and medical knowledge that promised to extend lifespans across dozens of species, all of it freely available to anyone with the scientific background to understand it. The Etherians were not handling this development well. Tom burst into the laboratory, his face flushed with excitement and alarm. "Yuki, you need to see this." Beth intercepted a transmission from the Etherian High Council. "They're planning something called the Final Purification." Yuki followed him to the communication center, where Beth had set up an impressive array of monitoring equipment. The woman had become their link to galactic events, tracking the growing chaos as traditional power structures crumbled and reformed. "Listen to this," Beth said, activating a recorded message. Veltharan's voice filled the room, but gone was the serene harmony they remembered. Now he sounded like a broken fanatic clinging to the wreckage of his world view. "The materialist infection spreads across the sacred galaxy like a plague of locusts," the High Curator declared. "Ancient mysteries are being perverted into crude mechanical processes. The divine light is being extinguished by those who would reduce infinity to mere equations." Reed entered the room as the message continued, his expression grim. "How bad is it out there?" "Depends on your perspective," Beth replied. "The progressive factions love us. 17 species have formally withdrawn from Dominion authority and formed something called the Scientific Cooperative. They're sharing architect data freely and helping each other develop new technologies. And the orthodox factions?" Beth's smile turned predatory. "They're losing their minds. Half the Etherian priesthood has defected to join the progressives. The other half is declaring holy war against anyone who uses architect technology scientifically instead of religiously." Veltharan's recorded voice reached a crescendo. "If we cannot preserve the divine mystery through guidance, then we must preserve it through fire. Better that the galaxy burn in holy light than be corrupted by soulless materialism." Tom paled. "He's talking about destroying the architect sites, all of them." "Worse than that," Beth said, bringing up tactical displays. "Intelligence reports suggest they're planning to sterilize every world that's embraced scientific interpretation of architect knowledge, starting with the Rim territories." Yuki felt ice form in her stomach. "They're going to commit genocide to preserve their religious authority." Reed studied the tactical information with professional assessment. "How many ships do they have?" "The Orthodox Etherians can count on about 40% of the Dominion military," Beth replied. "Plus the fleets of species still loyal to traditional interpretations. We're looking at several thousand capital ships and maybe 50,000 smaller vessels." "Against what?" "The Rim territories have some military assets, but we've never been allowed advanced weapons. Most of our ships are converted civilian craft with improvised armaments." Beth's expression darkened. "The Drakmari have volunteered their entire fleet and the Volanti are mobilizing everything they have, but it's not going to be enough." Yuki looked up from the plague cure data she had been reviewing. "What about the architect defensive systems? The database mentions automated protection protocols." "We've tried activating them," Tom replied. "The systems exist, but they seem to require some kind of authorization code we haven't found yet. Most of the defensive networks have been dormant for millions of years." Reed began pacing, his strategic mind working through possibilities. "How long before the Etherian fleet reaches us?" 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we're lucky." Maya chose that moment to return from her latest expedition to the local architect site, her arms full of crystalline data cores and her eyes bright with discovery. "I've got good news and impossible news," she announced, setting her burden on the nearest table. We could use both right now, Reed replied. Maya activated one of the data cores, filling the room with holographic displays. The good news is that I've found the authorization protocols for the Architect defense systems. They're not locked behind religious ceremonies or spiritual tests. They're protected by scientific challenges that require real understanding of advanced physics. And the impossible news? Maya's grin was wild with excitement and terror. The architects aren't extinct. They're still here, just not in any form we would recognize as life. They evolved beyond physical existence, but not into spiritual beings like the Etherians claim. They became patterns of pure information, integrated into the quantum structure of space-time itself. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Tom was the first to find his voice. You're saying the architects are still alive? More than alive. They're everywhere. Every quantum field fluctuation, every gravitational wave, every photon that crosses the galaxy carries traces of their consciousness. Maya brought up new displays, showing incomprehensibly complex mathematical models. They've been watching galactic development for millions of years, waiting for civilizations mature enough to understand their true nature. Beth leaned forward. Waiting for what? For someone to ask the right questions instead of just worshiping the answers they left behind. Maya's voice grew stronger with conviction. The Etherians have been performing their religious ceremonies for 10,000 years, but they never actually tried to communicate with the architects. They were content to interpret ancient recordings without ever attempting real dialogue. Reed felt hope beginning to stir. Are you saying we can actually talk to them? I'm saying we already have been. Every time we approach their technology, with genuine scientific curiosity instead of blind reverence, we're participating in a conversation that started millions of years ago. Maya's hands danced over the controls, bringing up communication logs from across the galaxy. Look at this data. Every progressive world that's been using architect technology scientifically has been receiving subtle guidance, course corrections. In their research, hints about new applications, warnings about dangerous experiments. Yuki studied the patterns Maya was showing them. The medical data I used for the plague cure. Some of those molecular specifications were more detailed than they should have been for a general database entry. Exactly. The architects have been customizing their responses based on each species' needs and scientific capabilities. They're not just providing raw information, they're teaching. Maya's excitement was infectious. And Tom, remember how easily you managed to integrate our computers with architect systems? That shouldn't have been possible given the technological gap. Tom nodded slowly. The interface is adapted to our hardware almost like they wanted to be compatible. Because they did. The architects have been subtly modifying their technology for millennia, preparing it for the day when younger species would be ready for true scientific partnership instead of religious worship. Beth's tactical mind was already working through the implications. If the architects are still active, do they have defensive capabilities? Can they protect the progressive worlds from Etherian attack? Maya's expression grew serious. That's where things get complicated. The architects follow what they call the principle of earned growth. They won't fight our battles for us, but they will provide tools and guidance to those who demonstrate genuine understanding and ethical use of knowledge. Meaning what in practical terms? Meaning we need to prove we're worthy of their advanced defensive systems by showing we can use them responsibly. Maya pulled up schematics that made Tom's engineering mind real. These are the authorization codes for architect military technology, but activating them requires a collective decision from all species involved. No single civilization can access the most powerful systems alone. Reed studied the requirements. They're forcing cooperation. They're encouraging it. The architects learned from their own history that isolated civilizations tend to develop destructive tendencies. Their most advanced technologies only activate when multiple species work together with shared ethical frameworks. Yuki was examining medical protocols in the database. This explains why the plague cure worked so well. The architects were actively helping me adapt their general medical knowledge to Drakmari physiology, and why our communication networks have been functioning better than they should, Beth added. Every progressive world has been receiving similar assistance. Tom shook his head in wonder. So the Etherians had it backwards. The architects don't want to be worshipped. They want to be partners. Partners in what? Reed asked. Maya's expression grew solemn. In preparing for what's coming. The database contains references to something called the Great Filter, a galactic threat that destroyed the architects' original civilization and forced them to evolve beyond physical existence. The same threat that's still out there, and it's heading this way. Beth's blood ran cold. How long do we have? Thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. The architects aren't sure because the threat moves in ways that don't follow normal physics. Maya brought up astronomical charts showing massive dark zones in distant galaxies. But here's the important part. They believe a cooperative galactic civilization has a chance of surviving what destroyed them. A fragmented galaxy ruled by religious dogma and species hierarchy doesn't. Reed began to understand the true scope of what they were facing. The Etherian Civil War isn't just about human discovery of architect science. It's about whether the galaxy will be ready for whatever's coming. And that's why the architects are finally revealing themselves to us, Maya concluded. Humanity proved we were ready for real communication by approaching their technology with curiosity instead of reverence. Now they're hoping we can help. Convince the rest of the galaxy to abandon religious orthodoxy in favor of scientific cooperation. Alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Beth rushed to her communication console, her face paling as she read the incoming messages. The Etherian Orthodox fleet just entered this star system, she announced. Veltharan is broadcasting, on all frequencies, declaring the Rim territories to be infected with materialist heresy that must be cleansed with holy fire. Reed moved to the tactical display. How many ships? 800 capital vessels and 3,000 escort craft. They're demanding immediate surrender of all architect technology and the execution of any humans involved in scientific interpretation of sacred knowledge. Maya was already activating the architect authorization protocols, her hands flying, over controls that responded to her touch like living things. I'm requesting defensive assistance, but the architects need confirmation that this represents a true cooperative effort between species, not just human self-interest. Tom was monitoring incoming transmissions from across the Rim territories. The Drakmari fleet is moving to intercept. The Volanti are launching everything they have. 17 different species are committing their military assets to defend the progressive worlds. That's what the architects needed to see, Maya said, as new systems came online around them. Multiple species choosing cooperation over submission to religious authority. The defensive networks are activating. Yuki watched in awe as energy patterns began forming in space around their world, invisible barriers that would make Etherian weapons ineffective. Similar defenses were appearing around every progressive world in the Rim territories. Will it be enough? Reed asked. Maya's smile was fierce with determination. The architects survived the destruction of their original civilization by working together across species lines. Now they're giving us the same chance. She looked around at her teammates, then at the displays showing allied fleets converging to face the Orthodox armada. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species are choosing science over superstition, cooperation over hierarchy. And if we win, then we prove the galaxy is ready to begin preparing for what's really coming. The architects will share their most advanced knowledge, help us build the kind of cooperative civilization that can survive anything the universe throws at us. Beth's tactical display showed the two fleets approaching engagement range. And if we lose? Maya's expression hardened. Then the galaxy burns in religious fire. And when the real threat arrives in a few thousand years, there won't be anyone left to face it. The first shots of the battle began lighting up the darkness between stars, science and faith finally coming to open war for the future of galactic civilization. Lieutenant David Park gripped his console as the scientific unity shuddered under Etherian fire. Around him, the ship's bridge hummed with controlled chaos as crew members from 6 different species worked together to coordinate the most desperate battle in galactic history. Through the main view screen, the space around Architect Prime burned with the light of 1,000 suns as 2 philosophies fought for the right to define reality. 3 days into the battle, the Progressive Alliance was holding its own, despite being vastly outnumbered. Architect defensive systems had proven remarkably effective, creating energy barriers that absorbed orthodox weapons fire and redirected it harmlessly into space. But Veltharan's forces had adapted quickly, using modified religious ceremonies to temporarily disrupt the defensive networks. "Incoming transmission from the Drakmari flagship," announced Beth from the communication station. "Admiral Krell reports successful breakthrough on the Orthodox left flank. Their ships are falling back toward Architect Prime's outer defenses." Reed studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The old strategies don't work when half your fleet starts thinking for themselves instead of following orders blindly. Indeed, the Orthodox Etherian forces were struggling with mass defections as their own crews witnessed architect technology responding to scientific commands rather than religious ritual. Entire squadrons had switched sides mid-battle when their engineers realized they could operate their ships more effectively by understanding the technology instead of just praying to it. Maya worked frantically at her architect interface station, streams of data flowing around her as she maintained communication with the distributed consciousness that had once been a biological species. "The architects are concerned about escalation," she reported. "Veltharan is attempting something they call a cascade disruption. If successful, it could permanently damage the quantum substrate that allows them to exist." Tom looked up from his engineering console in alarm. "He's trying to kill gods?" "He's trying to commit deicide against beings who evolved beyond the need for physical existence," Maya replied. "The religious implications are staggering, but the practical effect would be the destruction of every architect site in the galaxy." David's scanner array detected new energy signatures approaching from the galactic core. "Captain, we've got incoming vessels. Configuration suggests Etherian religious ships, but the energy patterns are different." The newcomers resolved into a fleet of cathedral ships even more ornate than Veltharan's vessels, their crystalline hulls pulsing with internal light that seemed to bend space around them. At their head flew a vessel that looked more like a living creature than a machine, its organic curves suggesting growth rather than construction. "This is Architect Prime Control," came a transmission on frequencies that bypassed their communication equipment entirely, speaking directly into their minds. "We are the Synthesis Fleet, Etherians who have chosen the path of understanding over the path of worship." Reed blinked in surprise. "Etherian defectors?" The mental voice continued with harmonics that conveyed both ancient wisdom and desperate urgency. "We are those who heard the true message of the architects. We have evolved beyond rigid theology to embrace the marriage of science and spirituality. High Curator Veltharan represents the old path of blind faith. We represent the new path of enlightened cooperation." Maya's eyes lit up with excitement. "They've made the breakthrough. They've learned to communicate with the architects directly instead of just interpreting ancient recordings." The battle's momentum shifted dramatically as the Synthesis Fleet engaged Veltharan's Orthodox forces. Their ships moved with impossible grace, seeming to dance between enemy fire while their own weapons struck with surgical precision. But more impressive than their technology was their coordination with the Progressive Alliance. For the first time, different species were fighting as a truly unified force. David monitored the changing tactical situation with growing amazement. The synthesis Etherians are sharing their targeting data with our ships. Our weapons are suddenly 3 times more effective. More than that, Beth added. They're providing real-time translation services. Every ship in the Alliance can now communicate directly with every other ship, regardless of language barriers. Tom shook his head in wonder. This is what the galaxy could have been all along if the Etherians had chosen cooperation over domination. Maya's architect interface suddenly blazed with new activity. Something's happening. The architects they're preparing for direct manifestation, physical presence in our dimension. Reed felt a chill run down his spine. Is that possible? It's incredibly dangerous for them. Physical manifestation means abandoning their evolved state, at least temporarily. They could be permanently damaged if the process goes wrong. Maya's voice grew tense with concentration. But Veltharan's cascade disruption is forcing their hand. If they don't intervene directly, he'll succeed in destroying their quantum substrate. Across the battle zone, space itself began to change. Reality rippled like water as something vast and incomprehensible forced itself into physical existence. The effect was beautiful and terrifying, like watching mathematics take on flesh and blood. All ships, came a new voice across every communication channel simultaneously. It spoke in perfect harmony with itself, thousands of individual tones creating a single unified message that every species heard in their own language. We are the architects. We return to substance to preserve the future we built together. Veltharan's response was immediate and desperate. Demons! False prophets! You are not the divine architects, but materialist imposters seeking to corrupt the faithful. The true architect's reply carried the weight of geological ages. We are what we have always been, scientists, explorers, refugees who left our knowledge, for those wise enough to use it. You have spent 10,000 years worshipping our technology while ignoring our message. We sought partners, not priests. David's sensors registered impossible energy readings as architect vessels began materializing. Around the battle zone, they were unlike anything in the galaxy, their designs following principles that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human minds could process. Yet somehow, they felt familiar, as if they represented the logical evolution of everything the Progressive Alliance had been learning. The cascade disruption is accelerating, Maya warned. Veltharan is using the architect's physical manifestation against them. While they're vulnerable in material form, he's trying to sever their connection to the quantum substrate. Tom's engineering mind raced through possibilities. Can we stop it? Not with our technology alone. But the architects are sharing their defensive protocols with anyone willing to accept them. Maya's hands flew over her controls. David, I'm sending you integration codes for the weapons array. If this works, our ship will become an extension of architect defensive systems. David felt his console come alive under his hands, new interfaces appearing that responded to thought as much as touch. The scientific unity's weapons transformed from simple energy projectors into something far more sophisticated, creating patterns, a force that seemed to sing as they moved through space. Around them, every ship in the Progressive Alliance underwent similar transformations. Drakmari vessels grew crystalline armor that reflected enemy fire back at its source. Volanti fighters gained the ability to phase through solid matter. Human ships found their computers integrating seamlessly with architect networks, multiplying their processing power 1,000-fold. This is incredible, Beth reported. We're not just using architect technology anymore. We're becoming part of their distributed civilization. But Veltharan's orthodox forces were making one final desperate push toward Architect Prime itself. The High Curator's flagship, a massive cathedral ship bristling with religious artifacts and divine weapons, broke through the defensive lines and began its attack on the planet's surface. He's targeting the primary architect consciousness node, Maya said, her face pale with alarm. If he destroys that, the quantum cascade will propagate across the entire galactic network. Every architect's site will be destroyed, and billions of beings will lose access to technologies they depend on for survival. Reed made the decision without hesitation. All ships, follow us in. We're stopping this here and now. The final confrontation took place in Architect Prime's atmosphere, with Veltheron's cathedral ship descending toward the planet's surface like a falling star of religious fury. The Progressive Alliance pursued, their diverse vessels working in perfect coordination as they wove between the massive ship's defensive fire. David found himself in direct mental contact with Architect defensive systems. His consciousness temporarily expanded beyond normal human limitations. Through that connection, he could perceive the true scope of what was at stake. The galaxy stood at a crossroads between technological cooperation and religious stagnation, between growth and decay. "The cascade has reached critical threshold," Maya announced. "Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now." The architects spoke one final time, their harmonized voice carrying both sorrow and hope. "Young partners, we offer you a choice. Accept our full legacy and become what we once were, or preserve your independence and face the future with only the knowledge you have earned." Reed understood immediately. The architects were offering humanity and their allies complete integration into their post-physical civilization. They would gain incredible knowledge and power, but at the cost of their biological existence. "We choose the third option," Reed declared. "We'll be your partners, not your successors. We'll face the future as ourselves, but with your guidance." David felt the architect systems respond to that declaration with something like joy. New defensive protocols flowed through the Alliance fleet, not replacing their technology but enhancing it. Human creativity combined with architect knowledge, Drakmari determination merged with ancient wisdom, Volanti adaptability strengthened by millions of years of experience. Veltheron's final attack on the consciousness node was met by a barrier of pure cooperative will. Dozens of species, working together with technologies they finally understood, created a defense that no single civilization could have achieved alone. The cascade disruption collapsed, its destructive energy absorbed and redirected into space. Veltheron's cathedral ship, overwhelmed by forces it could neither understand nor counter, drifted powerlessly in Architect Prime's upper atmosphere. In the aftermath, as rescue ships moved to collect survivors from both sides, Maya stood before the Architect consciousness node with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to the patterns of light dancing in the crystalline structure, "for trusting us with the truth." The Architect's reply came not in words, but in a flood of images showing the galaxy's possible futures. Worlds where different species work together to solve problems no single civilization could handle alone. Technologies that enhanced rather than replaced biological creativity. And in the far distance, preparations for a threat that would test everything they had learned about cooperation and survival. Reed found himself appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the new Galactic Cooperative, a position he accepted with both pride and humility. The galaxy that had once branded humans as savages now looked to them as teachers, not because they had superior technology, but because they had asked the right questions. Dr. Maya Okafor established the first Institute for Architect Studies, where young beings from dozens of species learned to approach ancient mysteries with scientific curiosity rather than religious reverence. Her students would go on to make discoveries that bridged the gap between known physics and the transcendent possibilities the architects had revealed. And in quiet moments, when the demands of building a new galactic civilization allowed, Maya would return to the consciousness node and simply listen to the vast, patient minds that had waited millions of years for someone to speak their language, the language of science, of cooperation, of hope for a future built on understanding rather than faith. The gods had never wanted worship, they had wanted conversation. And finally, after 10,000 years of silence, the galaxy was ready to talk.